The night the truth found her, Amara wasn't searching for answers. She was just holding a faded photograph, wondering how a life so full of storms could still feel like sunshine. In that moment, she realized the secret she had spent decades chasing had been with her all along. The rain outside tapped against the glass like soft fingertips, the sound threading through the quiet of her small living room. Her blanket was warm, her tea cooling beside her, but her eyes were fixed on the woman in the photograph. That woman stood on a sunlit beach in a yellow dress, laughing with the wind in her hair. It was her, many decades ago, before she knew how much the world could change, before she learned that happiness had nothing to do with what life gave or took away. She could smell the sea in her mind even now, feel the grit of sand between her toes. That day had been perfect, though she hadn't realized it at the time. It was strange, she thought, how we never know which moments will become the ones we carry forever. Amara had grown up in a small fishing town, where mornings began with the clatter of boats returning to shore and the salty scent of the ocean weaving through the streets. The houses were painted in pastel colors, sky blue, pale green, soft pink, though years of sea wind had chipped the paint to reveal the raw wood beneath. Her own home was small, 2 rooms and a kitchen, but to her it had always felt safe because her grandmother filled it with warmth. Her grandmother was a quiet woman, yet her words stayed in the air like perfume long after they were spoken. Happiness, she once told Amara as they shelled peas together, is not in finding what you don't have, but in loving what you do. At 8, Amara had nodded politely, not really listening. She was already dreaming of bigger things, a life beyond the fishing docks, a world filled with music and colors, and places that didn't smell like salt and seaweed. Her childhood days were a collection of small wonders, chasing her friends along the shoreline until their feet were numb from the cold water, climbing mango trees in the neighbor's yard, and laughing until juice ran down her wrists, sitting under the banyan tree in the town square, watching the world go by. She thought those days would never end. Then came the day that shattered them. Her father, a fisherman like most of the men in town, didn't return from a storm. The neighbors whispered that the sea had claimed another life, but her mother refused to believe it until the harbor master came to their door. Amara had watched her mother sink to her knees, her hands pressed to her face, her sobs muffled as if she was afraid to let them out. At 14, Amara understood for the first time that joy could be fragile, that life could turn cold in a single night. Her mother did not break in the days that followed, though. She worked harder than anyone Amara had ever seen, mending fishing nets for the neighbors, sewing clothes late into the night, selling whatever she could in the market. She never spoke of her own pain, but Amara saw it in the way her mother would sometimes pause at the window, staring out at the endless blue horizon, as if waiting for someone who would never return. That quiet resilience etched itself into Amara's heart like a permanent scar. Years passed. By 19, Amara's world had begun to open again. One warm afternoon, she met Zion. He was a carpenter, his skin sun-browned, his hands rough with splinters, his smile quick and warm. He was different from the boys she had grown up with. He listened to her dreams without laughing, and when he looked at her, it felt as if he saw not just who she was, but who she could be. Their courtship was simple, but full of small magic. Shared plates of street food, walks along the shore at dusk, long talks about everything and nothing. One evening, under the banyan tree where she had spent so much of her childhood, she told him her secret. She had been offered a scholarship to an art academy in the city. Her heart had been painted with dreams of color since she was a child, sneaking charcoal sketches when her chores were done. Zion's eyes softened. "If you go, I'll wait for you," he said. "But if you stay, we'll build something together." She stayed. The day they married, The air smelled of jasmine and salt. The ceremony was small, family, neighbors, and the sea as their witness. They moved into a single-room house on the edge of town, where the roof leaked in the rainy season, and the walls needed painting, but they filled it with laughter. Their first child came within a year, the second soon after, and life became a blur of work, meals, and stolen moments of tenderness. Money was always tight, but they learned to stretch what they had, turning scraps into meals and worries into jokes. Still, there were whispers inside her, like the echo of a forgotten song, the canvases she never painted, the colors she never mixed. But she told herself there would be time. There was always time, until one day, there wasn't. Their younger child fell ill, the kind of illness that emptied their pockets and kept them awake through long nights of fear. Hospital corridors became familiar as home. Just when they thought it couldn't get worse, it did. A close friend they had trusted with their small savings disappeared, leaving them with nothing. For months, it felt as if happiness had left them. One stormy night, driving back from the hospital in a borrowed car, Amara's world changed again. The rain blurred the road into streaks of silver, and the tires slipped on a curve. She felt the sickening spin, the crunch of metal, the world going black. When she woke, the first thing she saw was Zion slumped in a chair beside her hospital bed, his head bent in exhaustion. Something shifted inside her in that moment. She could have died without ever truly living, not because she hadn't loved, but because she had spent so much of her life waiting for happiness to arrive, never seeing that it had been there all along in the small, ordinary moments. When she recovered, she pulled her old paints from the back of the cupboard. She began to paint again, not for money, not for recognition, but for herself. The neighborhood children soon gathered at her table, wide-eyed at the colors. She began teaching them, using worn brushes and scraps of paper, watching their joy spill across the page. The years passed. Zion's hair turned silver, hers thinned and softened. They grew older together, slower but no less in love. When he passed away quietly one morning, she felt the tide pull her under again. But this time, she knew how to swim. She carried him in her heart, as she had carried all the other joys and sorrows of her life. Now, in her small living room, the rain still falling, she looked at the young woman in the photograph one last time. She turned it over, and with shaky hands, wrote, "This story tells us that happiness is not a place you arrive at. It is the way you walk through the world. Be grateful for what is in your hands. Be kind even when it costs you. And live with a purpose that makes your soul light. Everything else will come and go, but this will stay."